It's become all too familiar of a cycle. A mass shooting happens, and then politicians offer up thoughts and prayers, and calls for change are echoed all across the country. In the wake of the mass shooting in Uvalde, CBS 11 journalists came together to produce a special called Searching for Answers, all in an effort to look for possible solutions to the violence. For the first time, we're hearing from some of the journalists involved in that project as they share what they've learned covering mass casualty events over the years.
I'm Ken Molestina.
Name's Vince Bosques.
My name is Reagan Sharfetter. I'm a digital news producer.
I'm an investigative reporter here at CBS 11 News.
I've been a reporter in the journalism industry for nearly 30 years.
30 years.
20 years.
I have covered more mass shootings in my time in this business than I ever care to remember.
Sutherland Springs. I covered the Dallas police ambush. There was a mass shooting in Midland, Odessa. Santa Fe High School.
Of course, Uvalde being the most recent one.
It was a Tuesday. It was May 24th. And we were getting ready for a newscast here. We heard some noise coming out of Uvalde, South Texas, that there may have been a school shooting.
That phrase, school shooting, you just get a pit in your stomach.
When you talk about guns and you talk about kids in a school and you put that all together, the level of concern goes through the roof.
We went on the air, and within the next hour and a half, we started getting confirmed reports that a school shooting did in fact happen.
I remember just praying that, man, I hope no one was killed.
We heard the reports that there were 2 killed.
Now they think that there's at least five children that were killed. We get another update as we're driving down. It's now 10, and then 15.
But it wasn't until hours after everything had began to unfold and hours into our coverage that the sobering numbers were finally in. 19 kids and 2 teachers. It was unfathomable.
And honestly, you want it to go away. You just want to go home and for everything to go away, but you have a job to do.
One of the things that we noticed as soon as we got there was just sort of this, it was just chaotic, the scene there. It was still very fresh.
You see these members of the community and you can instantly spot them out because of just their faces. You know who they are.
Then you started hearing the stories. You started seeing the faces. You started putting all the, connecting the dots, because you're talking to this guy and he's showing you pictures. This is my niece. This is my friend's daughter. Or this is everybody was kind of related, and they were giving their own little statements. And, these could be my kids. The one that really got me was a young lady. She had 2 or 3 little siblings, and she did not go to school that morning of the shooting. None of her family did. And she was realizing the magnitude of the shooting. What if we went to school? I would not have been able to have my brother and my sister. Right? I wouldn't have my siblings. I couldn't tell them I loved them. I couldn't. She was going down the list of the things what she could have felt if her family was in there, if her siblings were in there. And I remember after that shooting, that last soundbite with her, I had to put my camera down and just think about it and keep myself composed.
You're asking them questions that may be, a really dumb question to someone who's experiencing this. Like, how do you feel? Well, how do you think it feels? It feels horrible, but you have to illustrate the feelings and the emotions through words and photos and videos so that people can see around the world, around the country, that what they're actually going through.
First and foremost, it's important for people to know what's happening. And I think secondary to all of this is, are people ready to talk about it? I can tell you personally, covering events like this, going all the way back to Columbine, I was in Littleton, Colorado for 7 days. One of the hardest things to do is to stand in front of someone and to ask them if they want to talk about their loved one. What you find in a lot of cases is that people want to talk about their loved ones. I think as human beings, when we're stressed, when we're panicked, when we're emotional, we want to talk to somebody. Oftentimes people just want to be heard. They want others to know about someone they loved.
I remember the day after the shooting talking with a grandfather of one of the victims of the school shooting. And I'll always remember his eyes. His eyes were bloodshot. You could see the pain in his eyes. I could tell that he was doing everything he could to hold back tears. And he pulled out his wallet and he pulled out a picture of Jose Flores, his 10-year-old grandson. And he just wanted to show me a picture of his grandson. I have a son who's 10 years old. And I just can't imagine. And I think about him when investigating this and when asking questions on state officials, and when sometimes things get uncomfortable because people don't like you asking questions, or when you ask why wasn't more done, and people don't like that a lot. It's the very least that I can do as a journalist to ask those questions and to push for answers.
One of my most compelling interviews as we sought answers for this special was with Dr. Ronald Stewart. He's a trauma surgeon at University Hospital San Antonio. And while we might believe or want to think that being this close to that kind of mass shooting nightmare is a once-in-a-lifetime nightmare, not so for that hospital. They have treated patients of both the Sutherland Springs mass shooting and also most recently in Uvalde. I have spoken to physicians for decades. I've never spoken to one quite like Dr. Stewart, who was so passionate about the issue of gun violence, not just the mass shootings that we are focusing on now, but the everyday violence that's destroying families, whether we know their names or not. He is absolutely emphatic that gun violence is a public health issue, and that as a nation we need to address it as a public health issue. Speaking with Dr. Stewart, he came to the table with facts, figures, ideas, and he believes strongly that part of the problem, really the biggest problem, is how we are approaching the issue as them, us, all of this energy going into the fight over guns and so little going into conversations about solutions.
Key takeaways, I think, from searching for answers start with the fact that there's not one blanket answer that's going to remedy all of this. The likelihood is there that this is maybe going to happen again. Mental health does need to be addressed. Arming bystanders doesn't necessarily always save the day. We prove that out by asking the question and looking directly at the answer. And the one thing we know for sure is that those people who work in hospitals in those moments of crisis when we need them the most, absolute heroes.
I know what people want to hear is that at the end of when we're covering events like this, that there's some hope. And honestly, when covering Uvalde and when I left there, I did not have hope. And when we started investigating, when we started looking at what has been done these past 4 years since the last school shooting that we had here in Texas, Santa Fe High School, and what had been done and what hadn't been done, it's frustrating. I will say, though, through this project, I did find some hope up in Sanger, Texas. There's a small school district up there that they are doing some amazing work with their students and providing services, mental health services to their students. Seeing what Sanger, the school district up there, is doing, that did give me hope. And if there's anything from this special, I hope that people that are in charge of schools, if I was in charge of a school, if I was governor, I would go talk to Ann Hughes. up in Sanger ISD, because they are changing lives up there. And out of everything that I've covered, that gives me hope. There are people that are working hard, trying to make a difference in people's lives. And maybe if we listen to people like Ann Hughes, and we went to towns like Sanger, and we saw what they were doing, maybe things would be different.
I would tell you that the biggest hope for me, and I think I can speak for all of my colleagues, not only here at CBS 11, but in the industry, I hope we never have to cover anything like this, ever, again. But I know that's not necessarily reality, but we can hope, and we can work toward it.